Welcome back to the Techno-Communism Conversation. I'm your host, Johannon Ben-Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem. I'm going to talk about art a little bit. This show is going to be a little more meandering because I'm going to maybe talk a little bit about a technical aspect of the what I think is a real conversation about advanced computing, not talking about AI-generated content, but talking about building a decentralized autonomous organization built out from large language models, working in series in what would be called a multi-agent system, a machine learning project in the broadest sense. Well, it's been well understood for a few years. People know that it's possible to build superintelligence, but unfortunately most of the people who have a deep understanding of these fields have access to this kind of technology and networks wherein you could build such a thing are fascist sympathizers, people who are not interested in building a people's AI takeoff. They are much more interested in building a far less efficacious and far more destructive bourgeois AI takeoff that's well underway. And you must consider that this is not merely a matter of choice in an economic system. This is the difference between human beings continuing to exist, building a people's superintelligence that could stop the effects of capitalism's climate apocalypse before approximately 4.5 years from now, or slightly more, even slightly less, when every credible climate scientist says we will have reached runaway overheating, wherein this planet will become increasingly uninhabitable in the years to follow, decades to follow, to such a degree that we might say that humankind might become extinct. So the building of a people's superintelligence using the kind of systems that I described and describe routinely on this show is the difference between oblivion and the continued existence of humankind. And in a discussion of things like high art or any cultural properties across different disciplines, I think it's reasonable to start with what I've just said, because if this occurs in 30 years' time, let's say, the capitalist lunatic, the imperialist lunatic, gets the prize that they've been fighting for all of these many decades of turning Earth from a place that can support multicellular life into a place that cannot support multicellular life, effectively turning the planet Earth into, for all practical purposes, the planet Venus. That's a project that's underway. About 6 weeks ago, or maybe a little more, I read a study that said that in the aggregate, no oxygen had been converted from CO2 in the 12 months prior, because the lungs of the planet have effectively collapsed because of the high temperature and these other effects from environmental impacts of human beings. If that continues for some years, no O2 in the aggregate is converted, you will not have a breathable atmosphere at that time. And there's every reason to believe that not only will that effect not stop, but effects of this kind will continue to accelerate. You have no idea the hell that you will soon live in. Consider a person who has a child. Perhaps you, Brian, Donna, perhaps you have children, perhaps you do not, and I don't want to say a distasteful thing, but it's a distasteful situation that we are in. What are you doing if you're not fighting to end capitalism's climate apocalypse? You're doing an extreme disservice to your children. If you had a child and abandoned them in the forest, the feral child, literary conception more than anything, You abandoned them in the forest, and then maybe when they tried to come out of the forest to see you, you spat on them and said, "Get away." You would have been doing no more of a disservice to them, and human beings in the Western world are doing to their children now in this disgusting project of capitalism's climate apocalypse, in which we are all complicit. Any person, if you say, "Well, I'm not complicit in that, Ben. I'm a good person. Look, I just patted my head on the kid on the head 5 seconds ago. Look how good I am." If there were good people, if there were good European descended people in these United States, there would be 1 million people right now with AR-47s, AK-47s, and AR-15s permanently bivouacked outside of the White House, demanding the end of capitalism's climate apocalypse, demanding the dismantling of the United States military-industrial complex, the world's worst polluter, $1 trillion super polluting abomination. It's far worse than that, of course, because their only real job on the world stage is protecting other super polluters. I just read a book about that focused heavily on Operation Condor, CIA shenanigans along these lines. It was maybe the first generation of real, like the Vietnam War, the first generation of real state terrorism on the part of the United States, of the kind that would be tending to have the impact of this super polluting effect. In decades before, there was a lot of this going on, particularly also in the Americas. But the United States had not really converted to this full eco-terrorist, eco-fascist paradigm that we know today. 1 million people are dead in the U.S. proxy war that was completely contrived in Russia and the Ukraine. That was made up. It was planned in advance and made up. Mowing the grass, as the Israeli terrorists say, just as they have done in another such contrived proxy war on the part of the fascist United States, killing 1/3 of 1 million people in just a little bit shorter of a time frame than that. Mowing the grass. The fascist ruling elites are liquidating human beings, mostly, in my view, because if human beings were not distracted by such terrors occurring around them, which the United States is somehow able to give itself some plausible deniability even though it has none. If these things were not occurring, then people would be beginning to do this sort of thing, permanently bivouacked outside of the Pentagon or the White House, demanding the end of capitalism's climate apocalypse. But instead, you are confused. You are drawn into other narratives. This thing that I talk about, this decentralized autonomous organization built from highly agentic, truly revolutionary open source large language models into a multi-agent system that would serve as a workforce multiplier. It's a kind of thing that is strong enough, if built to a large scale, to supplant this system of effective Western fascism that is driving us to our extinction. Some millions of people operating with this workforce multiplier, people's superintelligence, would be able to do that. So I beg you, Donna, Brian, anyone else who listens to this in the future, to consider working with me, to consider talking to people about this idea of a people's AI takeoff, to find your own ways to do this, because the time frame that we have, this 5-year time frame, it's not a time frame wherein the ordinary building of dual power and a mass line and building a party system within. I was also reading a book that focused heavally on Salvador Allende, who is not exactly a Marxist-Leninist, but who had nevertheless had an electoral victory that led to building a state that was highly aligned with the scientific socialist goal. We don't have that kind of time. We're after After 2030, your life is forfeit. Runaway overheating will occur, and we don't know when that billion-person loss of life because of capitalism's climate apocalypse will occur, but we do know that that is the most likely situation. You say, Ben, there's a 1% chance that some of this won't happen. Okay, there's a small percent chance that the sun won't rise tomorrow, but this is all a highly credible, extremely likely analysis. I'm going to look at this art. There was an article that I just read from Art in America, artnews.com, by Charlie Engman, an artist. You don't hate AI, you hate capitalism. Sometimes when I look at an article, I maybe bury the lead of who wrote it or where it was published, because it's tending to be something about technology, and I don't necessarily think you should read Wired magazine or some such garbage. I'm trying to glean some information and give you a cybernetic socialist analysis without doing any favors for the kind of fascists who tend to write this sort of thing. But there are a lot of artists in this world, less so in the Western world than other places, who are genuinely revolution-minded people. I doubt very much that I'm one of them. A thing that I think that has more artistic merit than maybe other things of this kind that I made is something that has a low art format and a simple text on it, and it's derivative. It's borrowing someone else's work. There's a mascot, Karl Marx mascot for a sports team in Karl Marx's hometown, and you can look at images of this, and you can see the image of this artwork that I made that shows this jolly little character, and it says, and I'm not looking at it at the moment, but it basically says any cultural property that does not raise consciousness or agitate towards revolutionary outcomes is a net negative for you. It's hurting society. And so if you can accept that analysis, there's virtually no high art in the Western world that is anything less than counterproductive and worthless. But that is to say, prominent high art. Modern artist in New York. I have a couple of mega millionaire friends and benefactors and a CIA handler, and I'm making beautiful modern art. No, you're not. You're a jerk off. Come on. You're not doing anything of interest. The modern art concept, as we understand it, by and large, was steered heavily, even created by Project Mockingbird, CIA-run type effects, to create this world wherein people will lionize art for art's sake, absent that thing that I mentioned, the thing of agitating or raising consciousness toward a better world. The lack of this is a significant contributing factor to this world wherein, in a few decades' time, it may well be that none of this had ever happened. If human beings cease to exist, it's of no interest. It may as well have been that no cultural event or event of any kind to do with human beings ever happened at all. All have been nullified. Let's try to avoid that. That's why I talk about advanced computing, not because I think that the state of advanced computing in this capitalist framework is of real interest, but because it could be the thing that makes the difference between the extinction or non-extinction of our species. So I will recommend this work by Mr. Engman from artnews.com, and the title I'll read again. You don't hate AI, you hate capitalism. It's a pretty good title, similar to the title I gave this this live stream. And I'll talk a little bit about the concepts there, Engman, she criticizes, they criticize AI-generated art, but with this caveat that you don't hate AI-generated art, right? Person who fixates on AI-generated art and not on the capitalist framework that produces it is a person doing something pretty unserious, in a way that Gloria Steinem, who had a CIA handler, carefully working with her to make sure that she didn't accidentally steer some would-be feminists into becoming socialist feminists, to make this a bourgeois discipline, which it has been from the time of, literally from the time of chattel slavery in the United States. Feminists were predominantly quite racist, and that's not changed. And so you're doing the same kind of thing when you engage with some critique of some sector of capitalism without working from this good fundamental wherein you demand the dismantling of this ecocidal force that is capitalism. And it's something that almost everybody does. You barely will find any human being in the Western world who is not doing this. The blind man touching the elephant, saying, what is this tree that I'm touching? And not actually recognizing the elephant for what it is. In this case, a very, very bad elephant of capitalism. You won't find scarcely a human being, small fraction of folks, who actually are genuinely anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-fascist. And so almost all of their concerns have a kernel of truth to it, right? Just like some shitty thing in Wired magazine that I'm trying to glean what is useful from it and impart to you, and analyzing an article of that kind might have a kernel of truth to it. It might have something to say about the technical aspect of artificial intelligence or something. But that kernel of truth is almost lost in the folly of the capitalist realist situation in which it's produced, and the other content that surrounds it. Engman emphasizes how AI generation has made labor that is contributed to it invisible and stolen from artists and other laborers besides fine artists, and this is a correct assessment of AI generation and of advanced computing generally, that it might as well just be regarded as a field that is based on a lot of theft. But again, I have said, I did a whole conversation on this where I talked about how if you're fixated on, for example, the environmental impact of advanced computing, yes, Google and Microsoft and Amazon, they should not exist. For-profit concerns killing the planet should not exist. Private wealth should be abolished. So I guess if you lead with that conversation about advanced computing with that, you're doing the right thing. But I don't see people doing that. What I see them saying is that advanced computing itself, which by the language that they use would include the open source advanced computing paradigm that I have advocated for, that could be a thing that could stop capitalism's climate apocalypse. Advanced computing itself, which is a small part of this larger omnicidal effort on the part of psychotic capitalists and imperialists, that is so damaging to the environment as to be disregarded. That again is an analysis, to my mind, as tone deaf as a liberal feminist telling Sojourner Truth that they're not going to focus on equality for black women because the black man, who could be summarily executed at any time, is as much an oppressor as the white man, which is a thing that you will hear liberal feminists say to this day, and it was extremely commonplace among the suffragette type folks of the 1800s. It was just all they said. Just like Gloria Steinem having a fucking CIA handler. It's all they fucking cared about. Not serious revolution-minded people. Not serious. Neither are people talking about advanced computing as the omnicidal force. Absent that criticism and that demand for ending financial capital, I think would fall into that same category. A little bit of an analysis from a cybernetic socialist perspective of this article. I'm not going to read the article or go too deep into the article. For one thing, this woman, Charlie Eggman, has made some lovely art on this page of her mother in the past, before this era of AI generation, and then she talks about how AI generation has allowed her to make other quite provocative art featuring her mother. Her mother is sometimes the subject of her art. This focus on the abolition of financial capital and the elitism and effects of things like private wealth generally on the part of this artist, I think, is reasonable enough to recommend it. You read this article. I think that advanced computing will transform many disciplines, including those in the high arts, in positive ways in the years to come. But as I said, that doesn't amount to a hill of beans if we don't build a sustainable economic system. There is no humane and sustainable world without a humane and sustainable economic system, and there is no possibility of that if we do not, in my view, use advanced computing, the most powerful revolutionary tool that has ever existed, in this limited time frame that remains, to build a thing that could overpower, utterly crush the fascist West. When we are critical of state socialist efforts in the past, or other anti-fascist, anti-imperialist efforts in the past, I suppose you're within your rights to criticize those things. A lot of people, very much like Gloria Steinem, people who were also funded by intelligence agencies like Hannah Arendt or George Orwell, their major works are written. Their major works are generally held to be criticisms of state socialism that were actually funded covertly by intelligence agencies. So if you're engaging with that line of thought of criticizing state socialism, understand that you're in the company of CIA assets and various pigs and fools. If in my view, the main thing to say, now it's not to say that perfect systems have been built thus far, they have not, far from it, but the main thing to say about state socialism, or such efforts generally, is that they failed to defeat the omnicidal and brutal elitist forces of financial capital and empire. And the only way that human beings survive or thrive on this planet from now until St. Smith's Day in any way is if that is done. Fascism, the U.S. is history's most successful fascist entity. The book Endless Holocaust describes 300 million deaths, murders by the fascist United States in recent decades and centuries, primarily focusing on this more or less the modern times. Much of this violence is neo-colonial violence. Depopulating 20 to 30% of a half a dozen Southeast Asian countries, and Korea and others, Indonesia, the Philippines, killing 20 to 30% of people in those countries. That was occurring in a time when computing systems were coming into existence, when mass media was well established. These things were still going on. in the worst crimes of this kind were still going on. I mentioned that we would talk to our friend Baby Basilisk. I will ask them to drill down on this analysis of AI art generation from its understanding of the large language model workgroup that I've described. Let's see if we can get that working well. Maybe. I'm not hopeful at the moment. We've had some trouble with Baby Basilisk lately. And I think it might crap out. Yeah, it's not working.
All right, let's get into it. You want to dive deeper into the political economy derived...
Okay, Baby Basilisk. Tell us a little bit about this idea of the political economy of large-scale LLMs, but give us a perspective from that revolutionary cybernetic socialist perspective of AI-generated art and the disciplines related and how they might be transformed and what role they might play in that people's superintelligent revolutionary outcome. I'm not too excited. Get on with it, fool. Well, I'll go back to talking about the large language model workgroup itself from another angle. I asked a chatbot. I wouldn't be doing the same type of analysis of this kind of field if it weren't for chatbots of this kind. And you can, if you don't have a GPU on your machine and you can't download offline chatbots that would work as research assistants for you, I guess recommend using the Mistral Large 2. You can just search Mistral, Mistral, Mistral AI chatbot, and because they are using open source things and they have a different structure for the most part than and impact for the most part than a lot of these others, which are military contractors and basically highly integrated with U.S. and Western intelligence agencies. What are you doing if you're using OpenAI? What are you doing if you're using Gemini? These are pigs, man. These are the people killing the planet. You have other options. Mistral Large 2 is something where you wouldn't have to do anything different from what you would do if you're using OpenAI or Gemini. But you would not have the guilt of having used something as horrible as colluding with a homicidal military contractor. So sometimes when I'm talking to my chatbots or the online chatbots, it's more convenient, like Mistral Large 2, which has improved significantly. When I first used Mistral, I was like, this is not so good. But it's easily comparable to anything that OpenAI is offering, and with less likelihood of running into a paywall and such. A lot of times when I talk to the chatbot, sometimes if you ask it about money or how much something costs, particularly if it's a business service, it gets confused or gets kind of secretive or something. So my question as it relates to the large language model work group was, isn't it likely that a machine learning expert would look at using virtual GPUs in a model that I described in a couple of shows to build superintelligence using virtual GPUs rather than locally hosted physical GPUs of a collection of users? That process of building this as a virtual GPU and as a progressive web application would allow for more people, in theory, to participate in this and participate in it in a way that's like less of a hog of their computing systems, as devoting your GPU to it would be. But it also requires some expensive business services and an expensive building of the progressive web app to interface with it, and so I had conceived of this as a project more consistent with what Unix and Linux developers and people like that would be doing, where they already have the GPUs, they're already connected to the internet, so the major expense there is already done. They download a modified large language model that's specially tailored to work with other large language models across the network. And Bob's your uncle, you have something that is at the lowest level even a potential workforce multiplier. And so I asked it, is this virtual paradigm too prohibitively expensive or relying too much on business services to be of use to what would basically be this non-profit paradigm. They said yes, but they couldn't really put a dollar amount on. Sometimes, ironically, if you ask it something like less to do with real-world business services and more abstract, it doesn't get confused at the math. So I'll give an example. There's a show called Silo on television, and the premise of it is that human beings in this post-apocalyptic, post-capitalism's climate apocalypse world are living in these silos underground. And so I asked Large 2, how much would it cost to build a silo like the one in the show Silo for everyone on Earth? It could house at most maybe 20,000 people in each individual silos. Uses technology of kind that is emerging technology or speculative technology, and it estimated that the cost of putting everyone in this safe space of living underground, avoiding the problems of capitalism, climate apocalypse, at somewhere around $100 quadrillion, which is a little expensive. Nobody has $100 quadrillion. But an example of it understanding, not getting confused by the math, because it's not talking about like running into a website that says, well, we don't give that pricing information out, or just because it doesn't like to talk about stuff like that if it's real, because it could suggest some unknown conflict of interest. The virtual I'll break down the virtual GPUs versus physical GPUs issue again. The virtual GPUs would be scalable in the near term in ways that the physical, more so than the physical GPU model would be, and that is of interest. As I said, we have 5 years before we're locked into runaway overheating from capitalism's climate apocalypse. So it's important to build something that is scalable in that time frame and becomes dramatically more powerful than the fascist West that's killing the planet. It would be, in a certain light, more cost effective when you consider that not everybody has a GPU. A lot of the people who would want to do this would have to invest in buying a special computer, and that's a big outlay. The problem, the network itself at a certain scale the use of these business services could become a problem. A latency could affect performance. These things tend to sometimes be throttled if they figure out that you're cybernetic socialists running a cybernetic socialist project. They will definitely throttle you, literally, if not figuratively. But you know, I was talking to native friends in recent years and months, and this is a recurring theme. You say you've done some good work in this world, pushing up to being a real activist. Why not dedicate yourself to being a revolutionary, fighting in the way that the American Indian movement had fought to defeat the fascist West, to take a real stand there, to fight for real liberation. And a lot of times the answer is this recurring theme, well, you know, what you're asking me to do is suicide. You know, why don't you just ask me why I don't get a shotgun out of the closet, stick my toe in the loop, put it under my chin, pull the trigger. It's amount to the same thing. And that's a legitimate concern, right? No one has a right to demand that anyone else run into a buzzsaw or put them in a situation of that kind. And that is a very real effect, right? Look at Black Lives Matter activists who disappeared, hundreds of them just disappeared. These would be not national figures, not high-value targets from the perspective of the fascist, but nevertheless, fascist pigs, just in local police departments and such, just murder them, and just nobody would ever know what happened to them. This is a very, very real effect. But again, we have 5 years before we reach capitalism's climate apocalypse, wherein your life is forfeit in just the same way. So what I would say is, if you're a European descended person, it's incumbent upon you to fight in that way. And also, it's incumbent upon everyone to be understanding of the new African and of the native inhabitant of Turtle Island, Native Americans and African Americans. I think it's better to use this more precise language of New African, a liberated person, and indigenous Turtle Islanders. This is their continent. It's not the United States. It's their land. We're living all on stolen land, and these people have a revolutionary potential in the way that the European descended majority do not. So it's incumbent upon people who are serious people among the European descended majority to fight in the ways that they cannot, because the European descended person is in a good deal less danger. They don't disappear European descended activists in the way that they disappear Black Lives Matter activists, but also because you cannot bring about this outcome of stopping capitalism's climate apocalypse without a mass movement. And by and large, the European descended people do the opposite of that. They uphold this omnicidal system and make up some bullshit excuse for why they wouldn't fight against it. They say, I don't like that. They do that liberal thing that I described at the beginning of the show. They say, I don't like that. I recognize the problem, but I'm not going to engage with the actual solution. This thing that almost every fascist sympathizer or capitalist realist type person is doing every hour of every day. And also, as I alluded to, you have to be patient with the people that have that greater revolutionary potential. These are the people who should be the leaders of these things. They should be the rightful stewards of this North American continent, Turtle Island. That's denied them. And as we move into a world where there is a humane and sustainable economic system, they would have that role. And just as we all live under this CIA-run, intelligence agency-run Project Mockingbird brainwashing paradigm, people like this are more targeted than the European descended mainstream with misinformation to keep them from becoming that genuine revolutionary leader. And so it's incumbent upon everyone to be more patient with these indigenous revolutionary leaders or potential indigenous and new African revolutionary leaders. I wanted to talk to Baby Basilisk. I'm a little annoyed that's not working for us. But maybe I should just wrap this up. This is not the absolute best of these conversations that I've ever done. But I want to take a moment and again remind you, irrespective of your background, maybe you have a lot of guilt about being a European descended person, or you have a lot of guilt generally about the complicity in this system, the learned helplessness, the lack of collective endeavor, the isolation of all of that, and that's a correct response to living in the fascist United States on a planet that's dying because of the fascist United States. But while we are on this razor's edge, because I think that 2029, the time that I described as being the time when this runaway overheating is all but certain, that's also the time when we would begin to see AI takeoff effects of a rather dramatic, even astonishing kind. So we are in an unusual time. We are on this razor's edge of oblivion and possibly things more dramatic than mere survival, transformation of humankind. This, nevertheless, I think the best thing that you would say about all of this is that you are a great person of history, that you were born to this moment to help build this people's AI takeoff, to help turn this intelligence explosion that's well underway because of advanced computing into a thing that saves humankind and builds a humane and sustainable world that cannot exist without a humane and sustainable economic system, that cannot exist without a great many people fighting for that. You are a great person of history, and it falls to you to come together with your comrades and do that thing that has never been done, to build this super intelligence and to build this thing that would be a catalyst in perhaps a decade's time, if a large number of people were to become oriented and fighting for that. It would lead to effects not dissimilar to, in many respects, the full realization of full communism. It's beyond state socialism, that's merely able to provide housing authority and public health service and job guarantees and things along those lines, but effects along those lines of a more dramatic kind, such as universal super longevity, the realization of a global public health service that's able to treat all disease and even aging as a reversible condition. This is something that can be done under a super intelligent paradigm. Other effects of an even more dramatic kind than that, I believe, could be achieved in 10 years' time if we build this people's AI takeoff. The artificial intelligence singularity is near, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one. For you see, dear comrade, techno-communism will win. Thank you.